as president before, and know very little about how you grew up. Tell us a bit about where you were born and the circumstances of your birth.
I was born in Kumasi on 8th December 1980. That's a long time.
Exactly, in my thoughts.
And I started schooling in Kumasi Government School. And then on to a boys' boarding school called Safety Boys Boarding School. It's a Methodist school. I was just 10 miles out of Kumasi. And then from there to Prempeh College, where I passed out 58. Then went on to London, 1959, to study to become a barrister, for which I qualified in 1961. I was called to the bar in London, 61, at the age of 22.
Wow.
And then the same year, I went up to Oxford University to continue with law. But after the first year studying law, passing the law exam, which in Oxford is called moderations, I came back to Ghana in 1962 to register as a barrister. I was called to the bar in Ghana in 1962. But I did then. But it's not law I wanted to use in my life. I wanted to go directly into politics.
Why?
Because I saw politics as the field with the maximum scope to affect the development of society. That's where power really resides,
Sure.
to do good. Of course, some would use the same power to do evil, but for me, it was the power to do good, and I thought it was in politics, because that I could help shape the society of Ghana, and also to be of service to humanity.
Also said initially, once the ceremony begins, please, we have to behave, because it's Parliament. It ceases to be a square or parade ground.
It's interesting that you say that you went to England, went to school, and then you came back. Because typically, most people have grown up knowing would rather stay abroad. Why did you come back?
I could have stayed abroad, because when I left Oxford in 1964, my first employment ever was with a bank in the city of London, city, the financial capital of Britain. And at the age 25 or so, 24, 25, I was at once made a manager and also the gala advisor. So with that position, I was getting more pay than senior managers, and I was living well. I could have stayed on. Perhaps the financial world, the sky might have been the limit for me. But that was not what was driving. I stayed in that job for just 3 months, and I decided to come back to Ghana. So I was in Ghana January 65, went straight to join the late Victor Usu in his chambers, Kumfuor chambers in Kumasi. It's a barrister, Then, 1966, there was a coup here in Ghana, and Victor Usu,
The coup that overthrew
Nkrumah. Victor Usu, the senior in the chambers, was invited by the military regime to become the Attorney General. And he left the chambers to me and another senior lawyer called Ousuya. So I worked with him there. But that time, politics all of a sudden sort of exploded. And everybody was talking politics. I wanted to, again, be in the mainstream of politics. So to get a platform, because I was just around 27, 28. I feared people might not take me too seriously because of my age. So 67, I became the town clerk of Kumasi. Town clerk, like
so you
city
started
manager.
from the local level?
City manager. And I held that office in 67, 68, 69. Within the 3 years, somehow I managed to hold the office down. I had about 4,000 employees, including a medical officer of health, city engineer, city treasurer, all much older
You're
people.
literally the big man in Kumasi.
Big man managing Kumasi. So the people got to see me as a responsible person who could be entrusted with responsibilities. So 68, when the Constituent Assembly was set up to do the second Republican Constitution of Ghana, I got elected. From the constituency I came to vote, Tromangobia, just outside Kumasi, to the Constituent Assembly. And it was there I worked with the big men of Ghana then.
Who was some of those?
Justice Blay, Nene Matikole, Nakwanchi Barimade, then Adan Sehine, Professor Bozia, mention all of them. Anybody who was anybody in Ghana, the big people. And there I was, yes, with all these uncles and fathers of mine.
We'll come a bit more to that. I just want us to also, at that time, typically again in Ghana, people's maturity is also measured by whether they're married, whether they have children. Were you married at the time?
I was married at the age of, is it 23 or 20?
Okay, wow.
1962 in London.
That's where you met your wife?
I met my wife in London, 61.
How did you meet her? Tell us about that.
At the Republic Day celebration in London, the first anniversary, where the dance was staged, and she had come from Edinburgh, where she had finished her nursing training. I was a young barrister. We met through the introduction of a friend. The coincidence, happy coincidence, was that she was going to go to Oxford, the University Hospital, to continue training as a midwife. I was going to Exeter College, Oxford, to continue studies. So when we were introduced and we found this common interest that we were going to live in the same place, we became friends, and the following year we were married.
Wow, that was rather quick, in a year?
Very quick.
Okay. And did you start a family then?
The very next year, 63, we had our first child. And then 64, we had the second child.
So altogether, how many children do you
5
have?
children.
And I'm sure that by now you have lots of grandchildren.
12 of them.
That's a lot. I imagine that should keep you busy at home. Do they come around? Grandpa?
They are all out of the house today. Normally, they prefer to live with me and my wife here in this house.
Okay.
To go into their parents. But they are scattered around this time. Some have gone on holidays.
Okay.
Suppose you had come during school time, and say if they hadn't gone to school, you hear the noises.
You have a little nursery around here.
That's what happens here.
Oh, wow. And how do you manage that? I mean, you've been president, you've been in the public domain pushing paper and just giving instructions, and now there are all these little children around you that you have to find a way to figure out again. How do you manage it?
I see myself in them. They are me. So it's not a burden at all. I'm very much a family man.
You know, children of today actually like to question authority. You give them instructions and they ask you, why should I do it?
I'm not the instructions man.
Okay, so how do you
I want to talk with people. And what I'm finding is that the youngest of the grandchildren is 2.5 years. But I'm amazed at her smartness, that brain works. So even when she sounds rebellious, I feel entertained. Way a little girl like that can talk back. Reason impresses me very much.
Do you find that other children in our culture, for instance, have the opportunity to do that? Because typically they'll shut you down and say, adults are
Well, I believe our society is changing very fast. In my days, when we were young, children didn't have this much latitude to talk back. But now it's a global community we are all being ushered into because of the telecommunication revolution, the ICT, the technologies and all that. these children grow up with a computer. And so their minds are so stretched. And we can't hold them in. That's the way to go. Of course, because they reason, if they are doing things that are bad, you argue with them to show them. But if you go that way, you lead yourself into problems.
Right.
You try to convince them not to go the wrong way.
Since the 7th of January 1992, and I go back to that because it's the foundation of the Fourth Republic that I'm referring to, is that the widespread belief that we had had since independence that somehow democratic governance, open, free governance, was not possible for Africans, either because of our historical context or because there were innate, inherent cultural traits amongst us that prevented us from being to embrace democratic governance. We have seen systematically since the coming in of the Fourth Republic, but that has proved to be untrue. That indeed it was possible in our country, with all its peculiar characteristics, underdevelopment, and backwardness, to be able to have democratic governance deliver effective governance. And I believe that that was the key issue that the Kufuor era, the NPP era, threw up. And indeed, it was possible for us to have a government that was not only open, democratic, prepared for criticism, prepared for differences of opinion, both fundamental reasons, and at the same time be able to deliver significant improvement in the life and the living standards of our people.
Let's talk about a bit of political philosophy.
Yes.
What exactly is it?
To me, man is the center of everything, more so politics. I always say that the justification for having a government is the goodness of man. I believe the state is there for man, not man for the state. And because of that, and because I'm totally committed to respecting human rights, I'm democratic. I want to allow everybody to have their own mind, to express themselves as they will, to give them the due respects of initiative and ownership and that sort of thing. Only limits being to keep within the agreed, enlightened law. That's the Constitution, the rule of law.
In terms of your own assessment, you have been characterized as one of those people. Would you say that politics in Africa, for instance, is also a reflection of that change?
Of course. Africa, when you look back in history, has suffered all sorts of bad governance for a very long time. Till quite recently, we were the continent of dictators, strongmen, autocrats. So Africa for the next 30 years or so, till towards the end of the last century, about 1990, thereabouts, especially with the collapse of the Cold War. It was then the new breed of leaders, as you described, began shooting up. It was then, and also with the collapse of apartheid in South Africa, that with men like Mandela coming on the scene, the African individual was given room to assert himself or herself as an individual, free human being, to talk, to protest, and to stand up shoulder to shoulder with other races.
Do you see yourself, for instance, as one of the leaders who led or contributed to that change? Because some suggest that you did.
Well, I came to office only 2001. The trend had begun, as I said, with the collapse of the Cold War and with the advent of the Mandelas of the world. Individualism began to set in.
Do you think that this is a possibility? Because since I have grown up, I've heard our leaders talk about Africa Union and Africa State or United States of Africa, but in reality they go to the conferences and they come back empty-handed.
They don't come back empty-handed. It's a trend, and the adage is that a journey of 1,000 miles begins with but a step. So, is this journey Africa has begun? The current leadership is talking of union governments, federal state of Africa, and so on and so on. We've started working on it. And so we've started launching and building institutions. Like now we have Pan-African Parliament.
Yeah.
Since I addressed it, it wasn't there before. We have the African Court of Justice. So the institutions are coming. And also the regional blocks like ECOWAS, which meets regularly. I was chaired twice. SADC in Southern Africa, so many of them all over the place. So it's like bit by bit we are reaching out, all groping towards the day when truly our continent will become like United States of Africa.
If I were to ask you to predict, for instance, in how many years you think this will materialize? I
wouldn't put a deadline. Say 10 years we must know. That's not the way human institutions evolve. But once the consciousness is set in motion, and again with the help of the telecommunication revolution, now we see each other through television and everything. People get to know that there's a world beyond their immediate confines. Say, in the 1950s, for instance, when our first leader, Nkrumah, was talking of the Pan-Africanism and all that, most of us knew of only Ghana. Yeah. So times are coming when we talk of a union government or what, it becomes a reality. Customs union, like say you want to cross the border between us and Togo. We are the same people, right from the coasts of the border to the northernmost parts. It's the same tribes traveling the border, but you try to go to Lomé from Accra. You'll be lucky to get to Lomé at the border. When you get there and it says don't go to Lomé, you'll be lucky to get through by within 30 minutes or 1 hour. Why should it be so? It's time that as we get to know each other better, understand all these things, hopefully will fall apart.
You think it will happen, say, in your lifetime?
It might happen because the world is now hurtling along into globalization. Till say about 30 years ago, till the information technology exploded. When people talked globalization, I thought it was very far off. Within just 30 years, globalization has become such a reality. So I'm sure with the ever-changing and improving technology, and also with the mobility of people, people travel a lot. Perhaps there will be an acceleration of development that what in the past would have taken, say, a century, might have been.